it's not a huge one,
No,
I
I'm
think.
gonna come back. First one is Nalanda University here in our Indian subcontinent, but that's another story. Your book, I'm gonna heavily use your book. I cannot wait to bring you to India. But let's finish our business in the Middle East, where our story began. A few
Hmm.
seconds ago, you were referring to Mu'tazila's belief in free will. Do you think that the Quran was created, or do you think Quran always been there like God? What causes Islamic golden age? Can you give us some idea?
The golden age, you mean of the Arab golden age?
Arab golden age. I'm gonna take you 8th century, maybe yeah,
Yeah.
8th century.
Okay. Well, that was a time of Muslim expansion. The Prophet had died in 637, and by that time he had conquered a good part of the Arabian Peninsula. And then the Khulafai Rashidin,
I thought Prophet died 633, but you could be right, 637.
I think it's 37 or 38,
Okay.
but whatever it is, around that time, and you had then the Rashidin Caliphate, and they were very um, quick. They were very good fighters. They expanded in all directions, and that's how Islam conquered a lot of territory. But then when it went a bit further up north, it came across. Well, it was in present day Iraq that they came across what the Greeks had done. So already there was some knowledge of what the Greeks had done, but there was then this massive translation effort in uh, because of some very enlightened caliphs of that time. And that's how Baghdad became the center of the Muslim intellectual world. And there was a lot of activity there. You had scholars from all over the place, traders also, traders bringing in different products, different things from across the world. And so there was a lot of intellectual ferment over there, and that's what generated essentially the large amount of intellectual activity, which then led to the beginnings of the rationalist movement. And the rationalist movement was very important, I think, to the development of science in Islam. So between the ninth and the 13th century, you have a lot of important things being done by Muslims.
So you mentioned about Mu'tazila's movement. Can you tell us before probably I ask you to explain what Mu'tazila's movement? You said that Prophet was born 570 and then he passed away around 637 or 38. But and then Rashidun Caliphate and then Umayyad and then Abbasid. But during the Abbasid, what you mentioned, you did not mention, but you kind of indirectly said during the Abbasid Caliphate, the Islamic Golden Age started. Who did it start with?
Who? Sorry?
The Islamic Golden Age started with who is Abbasid
Yeah, so
Greek?
it was centered in Baghdad. And because all these translations were being done and rationalist Greek thought was coming into Islam, so it caused quite a lot of interest, but also panic. The interest was because this was a new way of looking at the world, which was based upon reasoning, on logic, on observation. And it was also very empowering because the issue of free will was coming into discussion, and
Yeah, I read your book.
issue of free will was coming into discussion. And
Yeah, I read your book when you drop an apple, okay? So of looking at these things. One is okay, the gravity pull it down. The other way is because the God wanted to move down. So
yeah,
if you explain using God, then okay, then there will be no science. So I'm gonna of course take every opportunity to refer everything I learned from your book and from your lecture around the world. But let me go back to asking you the same question. Who is Caliph was responsible to start the Islamic Golden Age?
um, so it was Harun al-Rashid, who is considered the biggest amongst them, and his court had a lot of
So
Scholars visiting from all over the
Harun
world.
Rashid, Harun Rashid founded something called House of Wisdom,
Baitul Hikmah, Baitul Hikmah.
Baitul Hikmah, 790.
Yeah, yeah.
And then his legacy was carried by his son.
Yeah, yeah. And so you have Al Mamun and a whole bunch of them who were fascinated by these ideas of science and astronomy and medicine and so forth. Because you see, nothing of that sort existed in the desert culture.
And
That was pretty sterile. After all, they were essentially nomadic people, but also even if they were settled, it was very harsh living. There was no culture as such, and so when they come across these very deep thoughts and can understand them because it's in Arabic, then of course it makes a huge difference.
absolutely. So when you mentioned a few seconds ago about Mu'tazilas, how Al-Mamun supported Mu'tazila and how Mu'tazila supported Al-Mamun to kind of promote the idea of creating new knowledge centered around Baitul Hikmah or House of Wisdom. So how Al-Mamun supported Mu'tazila? Well, by the way, what is Mu'tazila?
Motazilla, it's just a name. I don't know where that name came from, but it came from there was a discussion around predestination versus free will, and from that there was a man by the name of Abdul Wasil, and Wasil became the founder of the Mu'tazila movement. And the whole idea was to reconstruct Islam on rational grounds. So he, why did Mamun support them? Because, well, this was, remember, an age of great prosperity, wealth, and there were no big enemies on the horizon. Let's remember that Islam was like well, the United States in the 1950s. No, no, there, sorry, that's not there. But after the Soviet Union fell, there was no um, rival for the US. So
Maybe
similarly,
maybe I should use this opportunity to make some parallels. What country enjoy the separation of state and church in 800 and 9th in 8th century and 9th century?
this I don't know. I don't know if there was a separation, not certainly not among Muslims as such, but
Don't you
there,
think that Al-Mamun and Mu'tazila's relationship create a separation between church
yeah,
and
yeah,
state?
but it wasn't a formal separation. It was that so look, the impact of all this on society itself was not very large because all these things were in the private domain, in the domain of the courts. And it's not that this got translated into what was being taught to the rest of the public. In fact, the public education really started with the madrasas, and that was
Then
much later.
Al-Qurayn Madrasa was now it considered as the oldest university in the world. It was built in Morocco by Fatima Al-Fihri,
Yeah, but that's Morocco is way, way far away, and
but it was under
I
Abbasid. It was under Abbasid.
I think it was more like the 10th century,
It was founded 859, so ninth century.
9th century. Okay, all right. Yeah. Um, but look, if that's the first one, and it's not a huge one,
No,
I
I'm gonna come back. First one is Nalanda University here in our Indian subcontinent, but that's another story. Your book, I'm gonna heavily use your book. I cannot wait to bring you to India. But let's finish our business in the Middle East, where our study began. A few
mm,
seconds ago, you were referring to Mu'tazila's belief in free will. Do you think that the Quran was created, or do you think Quran always been there like God?
Look, I can only tell you what they were debating. How do I know whether it was created or not? I'm a scientist. I don't know. And I mean, look, there are more rational explanations of how the Quran was written,
Right.
and whether in fact it is that original, whether it remained in the original pristine state. So that's another discussion over
That's
there.
another discussion. So the Mu'tazila believe in, what do you think? Mu'tazila believe in the Quran always existed or Quran being created at some
Oh,
at some time?
they said if they believed in the creation of the Quran,
That's
Khalq
that's
Khalq Quran.
right. Right.
Yeah, so they believed it was created.
It was created. And they believe
Because if
also,
it had been there for all time, they said, well, then all earlier wisdom should have been in there.
right. So that was their argument. And also they believed in free will, as you mentioned a few seconds ago.
Yeah.
Now, Mamun supported Mu'tazila, Mu'tazila supported Mamun, and that's how new knowledge being created, including the creation of algebra in the House of Wisdom. Lots of women mathematicians also emerged due to this separation of church and state. Of course, as you said, there was no formal separation, but informal separation. When this separation of church and state ended,
Um, well, I don't think you can look at it in Christian terms.
I see.
It's not that
I was thinking like persecution of Mu'tazila is remove the gap between source and state.
so the state so the tendency of rulers became they became more orthodox.
Right.
They insisted that one should not look outside of the Quran, and that the only real knowledge was to be found in the Quran, and they used religion often as a means of their to legitimize their power.
So there was a ulama state alliance.
Yes, there was an ulama state alliance, and you could say that in the time of the Mu'tazila, that relationship was a difficult one.
There,
And
yeah,
that is why you had people like Imam Ibn Hanbal being
jailed,
persecuted.
been jailed, yes, by Al Mamun, by Al Mamun.
Yeah, yeah.
So who started that alliance, the state ulama state alliance? Who do you? I'm gonna name three person who you think more responsible. Imam Al Ghazali, number one. Number two, Al Qadir, Khalif Al Qadir. Number three, probably Seljuk Empire. Seljuk Empire. Who was the first vizier of Seljuk Empire? Not fast. Oh. Nizam al Mulk. These three persons, Nizam al Mulk. So
Nizamul Mulk, yeah, yeah.
who you think more responsible?
You'll have to ask a proper historian for that because you'd need to compare the impacts of all of these. I mean, in terms of thinking, perhaps Imam Ghazali had the biggest impact. But in terms of organization, Nizamul Mulk was the one who created the whole madrasa infrastructure and gave gave a curriculum to what Islamic education should be, and that remained for the next 1,000 years.
That's
So
closed the door for women for sure. That's closed the door for women. I mean, the fiqh became like more orthodox, as you mentioned, and then that shut down the door for women to pursue education. So we did not see any Muslim women emerge after 10th century. Who was responsible for the collapse of House of Wisdom? You think Mughal? or you think House of Wisdom collapse declined way before Mughal invaded Iraq?
Well, the Mongols came and they just turned Baghdad into dust. So 1258 is when that happened, and I think that uh, that didn't have to do with anything except military defeat.
Right.
I mean, they could have negotiated with the Mongols and pleased and flattered them instead of provoking them, and which they did.
Absolutely.
Then,
Absolutely. That happened because there was a always tension between Caliph and Vizier from the Seljuk Empire. So Mughal knew that and took advantage that these guys are weak.
yeah, yeah.
So the Mughal invention of Iraq ended the Islamic Golden Age, or the Ulema alliance, the state Ulema alliance ended the Islamic Golden Age.
It's probably both, but I mean, why does the character of a civilization change? I don't really know. I think, okay, first of all, Islam was extremely prosperous in the beginning because it was conquering new lands. Just after the Prophet died, so 712, you have Muhammad bin Qasim coming to
India.
India. And then and then you have the conquest of Spain, and then Islam also goes to Indonesia. And so while it was in the phase of expansion and while it did not have enemies, I think Islam was prosperous and you could have, because when there's plenty, then you can have time and resources um, for entertaining useless people in the course. I mean, useless
You
people
always
like, yeah. So it's when a, a civilization is rich and secure that it explores new avenues. And now, when the external challenges grew, and the internal ones also, because there are a lot of internal revolts, so then Islamic civilization starts running out of steam. And so, even before the Crusades, it was Muslims were getting weak. And then, of course, much later you have maritime imperialism, you have the Dutch and the French and the English and so forth. But that's much, much later.
you took us to India with Mohammed bin Qasim. Okay, you always share your frustration with people who invite you, telling them Muslim had a chance. Muslim rule India for, I don't know, 712. I'm not going to say 712 because they started 712, but they did not conquer all India 712. I would say, I don't know, from I don't know, from 1200, I don't know, 1200 to 1800, or you would say from 1000 to 1800.
There were constant incursions from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and let's see, Mahmud Ghazni came in 900 and something, 980 something.
So
So even
1000,
before that,
even before that,
yeah.
absolutely.
But look, there was
No,
already,
I want to remind you how you share your frustration. You often tell people, your audience, that the Muslim ruled India as big as India for 1,000 years. They had chance, but they did not build any university.
okay, so you want a more accurate date? I'd say, how much is it? 800 to the present, 800 to,
1857,
yeah, it's more than 1,000 years, actually.
more
More
than a
than a
thousand
thousand
years. Yes.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
we want to be precise, more than 1,000 years, because 1857 when Bahadur Shah
Yeah,
lost.
but let's remember that there were Arabs who were living on the west coast of India, um, and Malabar, Kutch. those areas, and they had come. They were initially not Muslim, but then they converted to Muslim, and they were part of the. I mean, that was India had Muslims even before the major invasions.
Oh, okay. That is true. But what your frustration is, that is the Muslim had all the power for at least 1,000 years. Uh, they had all the power to build a university. Instead of a university, they would be going hunting, right? And Hindus would be doing all the tricky business, including bookkeeping and the other things. And when British took over, they lost. Bahadur Shah lost. They knew that the Bahadur Shah would lose because they did not lose 1857. They lost 1757. So it was coming for 100 years. But
Yeah.
still, they did not take it seriously. They did not believe that the British would take it over today or tomorrow. So come 1857, they all became, I don't know what they became. They became nobody.
Well, a lot of this had to do with the moral temperament because they were totally, I'd say, indolent, self-obsessed. They didn't care about what was happening in much of the country. And when the Portuguese and the French and later the English came, they weren't concerned about the fact that they had already formed colonies on the coast. So, in fact, what the Mughals did, was they instead of building up sea power, they started inviting the English to protect them against the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French, which the English very happily agreed to. And then they said, okay, um, why don't you collect taxes for us? Because we're having problems with certain nobles not giving us taxes. So then they became tax collectors. And when they became tax collectors, that's when they became politically powerful and so on. And then by the time that the locals had realized that the English were here not to trade, but to rule, it was too late.
So your frustration is because they had opportunity but they lost it. However, why they kept making mistakes again and again and again? When British took over, why they decided not to learn English? For how long? Until Syed Ahmed Khan? I don't know who you're gonna give credit.
Well, they didn't want to learn English because they said, why should we learn the language of those who have defeated us? And the hope was always there that one day we will kick the English out of India, and then we won't need the English language, and we can go back to being, um, we can live happily ever after. So, in fact,
Going back to hunting and fishing.
yeah, the old glories.
Okay.
And so the 1857 revolt had a major component, not all of it, of the restoration of Bahadur Shah Zafar as the emperor.
Last.
As a well, yeah, he was the last. I mean, the British then sent him into exile in Rangoon, Burma. But yeah, that was the goal. That was the aim of 1857 rebellions.
So, for how long Muslims in India uh, did not or did not learn English or did not pursue their education in English?
How do I put a date on that? A lot of them still resist it. And in fact, English is barely spoken in Pakistan now.
Oh,
You
that's
can,
we're gonna move finally to Pakistan once we hit 1947. You often
yeah.
also
So
share your
the
you also
resistance was there. The resistance
you
was
often
there.
also share your frustration, telling that Pakistan will never have Stephen Hawking at least next 200 years. We're gonna touch Pakistan, but what do you think? So, do you give any credit to Syed Ahmed Khan for the Muslim people studying education,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
English?
yeah. He was very insistent. He said, look, stop crying about the past. Forget about the fact that your forefathers were very great. Now, you you Muslims should now understand that the world has changed and that science is now the thing that determines outcomes. And so let's start learning English and let's learn science. And that's why he started the Translation Society, established the MEO College, and he was not in favor at all of madrasa education. He said those things just put your minds to sleep. And he was able to do all those things, of course, because he had British support and also the support of the Muslim nobility, the Ashrafia in UP.
You often share your frustration, telling that Pakistan will never have, not never have, Pakistan will probably not have Stephen Hawking next 200 years. Why do you believe that, sir?
Oh, no, 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 I don't know. It's, look, Stephen Hawking's, Abdus Salam's, Albert Einstein's, these are all freaks of nature. They are people with extraordinary capability and they can grow in various environments. So who knows when the next one of amongst them will come up.
That's probably true.
Although I think the chances, yeah, although I don't think that anyone is going to make as big a difference now as a talented individual could have in the past. If Einstein was born today, I think his impact upon physics would be much smaller because others would have discovered the the theory of relativity, quantum
That's right.
mechanics, and
That's
so
right.
on. So
So this is the time.
whatever we discover now will be relatively small.
That's right. Because this is the time when people do research together. Instead of like that's why it is very unlikely that we're gonna have Sir Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking, even country like United States or UK or yeah.
Yeah.